Hi everyone. It's great to see you again. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Today, we have a brand new story to share with you. So, let's get started. At first, it was very quiet and hard to spot. After being married for a long time, we had our good and bad times. But this wasn't like that. In some way I couldn't quite put my finger on. Lisa, my wife, seemed flat. Conversation stopped being two-way, and her laughter, which used to fill the house, stopped being heard. I first thought it was stress. After our old house burned down, things were tough, and moving in with my grandma wasn't her idea of a fresh start. Something about her, though, made it clear that this wasn't just about the fire. Things that were small began to add up. She said talks that didn't exist were the reason she got home late from work. When she left her phone on the kitchen table, she couldn't take it off her hand, and the screen always slanted away from me. Other nights, she'd forget to wear her wedding ring and say she was in a hurry or that it didn't fit right anymore. I tried to forget about it. I really did. I told myself that every relationship goes through different stages, and this might be one of those times when we needed to get back together. I quickly learned, though, that I was the only one trying. To me, the turning point wasn't even a big deal. It was in the little, everyday things. I asked her one night if she wanted to watch one of her favorite shows with me. This was something we did all the time. I asked her to solve a hard math problem, and she looked at me like I was crazy. She said, "No, I'm tired," and barely looked up from her phone. I saw her laughing and engaged at something on her screen later that night. You didn't laugh like you do when you see a funny joke. It's the kind you get when you're with someone who makes you feel alive. I could no longer ignore the signs after that. She was moving away from me, and there was someone else. It had to be. I tried to talk myself down, thinking that maybe I was exaggerating, but I could see the truth. Things like the small nudges, the rapid change in her clothes, and the complete lack of closeness all led to the same conclusion. She wasn't just fed up with being my wife. Either she was seeing someone else or she was really thinking about it. It was something I knew I had to talk about, but how do you do that? Hey, are you seeing someone else? That's not exactly something you drop by accident at dinner. I waited. I watched. I began to notice trends, like how she'd forget she had plans at the last minute or how her tone would change when certain names came up. She wasn't just far away. At least in my mind, she was gone. It felt like I was living with a stranger. I think a part of me had already accepted it when I looked back. It was easier because she didn't care about me anyway. On the other hand, I still had hope that we could work things out and that she would come back to me if I gave her enough space. I know it was stupid, but you don't just break up with someone after building a life with them. That's what I thought at the time. It wasn't the fear itself that was hard. It was having to wait. I'm ready to catch her lying. I was waiting for her to tell me what I already knew. I'm waiting for her to care enough about it to hide it. Every time we talked, I felt like I was living on borrowed time and that the inevitable was just around the corner. I think she knew that too, deep down. There wasn't anything unusual about the night it all fell apart. Not at first, anyway. Like always, when I got home from work, the house was quiet. It was winter, so it got dark early. As soon as I pulled into the driveway, I knew something wasn't right. The porch light wasn't on, and her car wasn't in the garage. Even though that wouldn't normally worry me, the way things have been lately, it did. When I walked in, I called for her but got no answer. At first, I thought she might have left to do something or see a friend, but as I went through the house, I saw that the light in her bedroom was on. It was when I went upstairs that I saw her. Putting on makeup, she stood at the dresser. She wasn't wearing jeans and a sweater like she usually does when she runs chores. I hadn't seen her in that black dress before, it was brand new. The hem was longer and the top didn't leave much room for interpretation. I had never seen her wear heels that were that high before. For a short time, I stood in the opening and watched. At first, she didn't even see me. She was too interested in her bright red lipstick, which changed the way she looked. Then it hit me. It wasn't just any night out. This was done on purpose. She got dressed for someone. I kept my cool even though my chest hurt. I didn't scream. I didn't ask for answers. I asked instead, "Are we going somewhere?" As she put it on, her hand stopped and she looked at me in the glass. There wasn't even a hint of guilt in her face, it was just angry. She told him straight out, "No, I'm going out. I have a plan." I didn't respond right away. I think she was ready for a fight, an explosion, or maybe even some pleading. But I did nothing but stare at her. Did I say something? Her voice was rough. "I told you I had a date. I'm going out with someone else." Even though my heart was racing, I wouldn't give her the pleasure of a scene. I kept my tone even and said, "No." She turned around to look at me, clearly mad. "No." "What?" I told her, "You're not going on a date while we live together. It's okay if you want to see someone else. You should still pack up and find another place to stay. I'll file for divorce once you're out, and then you can do whatever you want." Her laugh was mean and sharp. She said, "I'm not leaving. I like this house, and I'll do anything I want with it once I get it. When we sell it, I'll make sure I get most of the money because you keep being a jerk." I took a big breath and tried to be patient as much as I could. "I told you to stay with your folks until this is over as a favor to both of us. I don't want to leave, you do." With a proud look on her face, she crossed her arms. She said, "Oh, I'll be back in 30 minutes. If you're still here when I get back, I'll call the cops. I'll tell them you called me names and maybe even hit me. You already know how it works. They'll keep you there for 48 hours, and I'll have changed the locks by then." A cold anger started to build up in me. She really thought that was a good way to trick me. I told them, "You're wrong," in a calm but strong voice. "You think you can scare me, but I'm not leaving." When she looked at herself in the mirror again, she rolled her eyes and said something about needing to fix her lipstick. My mind was going crazy as I left the room. She was in for a surprise if she thought she could walk all over me. My mind was running when I left that room, but not because I was scared. I knew how she played, so I could change my game if she wanted to get dirty. You could tell she was sure of herself by the way she talked and the threats she made. She thought she owned the house and my life. It made me angry, but I didn't lose it. Instead, I thought about what I could control. I wasn't going to let her beat me up without a fight. The baseball bat was leaning against the wall when I walked into the garage. It was the same bat I used with my friends when we played baseball in the summer. I took it in my hand to see how heavy it was. Her car was parked outside, and I could almost see the smug look on her face as she thought about going to meet her lover and leaving me to stew. Not tonight, though. I hit the car hard with the bat as I walked over to it. The headlights and taillights were broken by 4 good hits, so the car couldn't be driven at night. I wasn't done. I knew all of her habits. The kitchen counter was where she always kept her bag. It was right where I thought it would be when I went back inside. I carefully opened it and found her phone. The fact that she was always the same made me almost laugh. I took it back to the garage, took the battery out, and put it on my workbench. When the hammer hit the phone hard, it broke into 3 pieces. I put the broken parts back into her bag, but left out the battery because I was done. She wasn't going to call anyone tonight. Then I saw a small package of condoms in her bag. I almost stuck a pin through them for a split second just to bother her. I thought about it again, though. She probably just said I was trying to frame her, which was too much trouble for me. She was dressed when she got to the kitchen. That silly red lipstick, a black dress, and shoes. When she looked at me, she seemed both annoyed and proud, as if she had already won whatever crazy game she was playing. She held up the door and told me to leave like I was an invader. I didn't move. I made myself a coffee instead, leaned against the counter, and took a slow sip. I told them, "Good luck with your night." She narrowed her eyes. She asked with a louder voice, "What did you do?" I smiled and drank some more. I told them, "Why don't you go check your car?" She stomped out the front door with her heels making a lot of noise. A short time later, I heard her yelling, very upset and angry. She stomped back into the house, furious. She yelled, "What the hell did you do to my car?" I just shrugged and kept my voice light. "It's parked on the road." There were lots of possible outcomes. She hissed, "You jerk. I will just ask him to come get me." I told her, "Go ahead," and pointed to her bag. "For that, you'll need your phone." After a split second of shock, she pulled the phone out of her bag. When she found out it wouldn't work, she became even more angry. "You broke my phone." I sat down and crossed my arms. "You might have done better to watch it." At that point, she was so angry that she was almost quivering. Before leaving, she probably changed from heels to sneakers because she thought she could knock on a neighbor's door and take their phone. From the window, I saw her going from house to house, getting more and more angry when no one answered. When she got to the end of the block, she was yelling. While I waited, I leaned against the counter and sipped my coffee. I was sure it was only a matter of time before she called the police or found someone willing to help. I was ready either way. She thought she had things under control, but by the end of the night, she knew she was wrong. It wasn't long before things changed, but not in the way I thought they would. I could hear her shoes hitting the floor above me as I sipped my coffee. Then there was quiet. That made me want to see what she was doing. I quickly looked out the window and saw her walking toward the garage. She wasn't going to forget about her plans so quickly. I knew Lisa, though. She was reckless, yes, but it was easy to see how desperate she was. She knew her car wasn't working, so she must have thought I had left my Suburban, or Beast, in the garage, ready to save the day. She didn't know that I had already turned off the garage door opening in case she tried to do the same thing. I sneaked up behind her and peered in through the side door as she got into the Beast's driver's seat. An awful, deep sound filled the garage as the engine roared to life. I almost stopped her for a second, but I chose to let her make her own mess. The garage door button didn't work the first time she hit it, so she did it again. She looked angry, but she didn't stop to think. Instead, she did the most Lisa-like thing you can think of. She stepped on the gas. As the Beast charged forward, it slammed into the garage door with such force that I got chills. The old door couldn't handle the 454 horsepower engine. It was very loud as the Beast sped out of the garage, pulling what was left of the door with it. Metal and wood were breaking apart. That wasn't the worst part, though. A police car was parked right behind the garage, in what was probably the worst place possible. 2 police officers had just shown up after Lisa said she would call the police. That's how hard the Beast hit the front of the cruiser. It pushed the car back a few feet and bent the front end into an accordion shape. When the crash happened, a cop had just opened the door on the driver's side. He lost his balance and fell to the ground and the door swung back fiercely. His partner, a blonde I knew from high school, was already moving and pulled Lisa out of the Beast by her hair before she could even think about what had happened. The red-haired cop yelled, "Get on the ground," and her voice rang through the neighborhood. Lisa screamed something that didn't make sense as she was being pulled to the ground. She didn't even fight back properly, she just cried and screamed as the police officer handcuffed her. I quickly went over to check on the cop who had been hit. It was clear that he had broken his nose because blood was running down his face. He was aware, though. I told him to stay still and held his head up to keep his neck steady. "There will be help soon." The next 20 minutes were a mess. Some neighbors were brave enough to step outside and look in while others peered in through curtains. As more police cars and ambulances pulled up, their lights flashed. As I talked to people, I kept one eye on Lisa, who was handcuffed and crying like a child who had been found stealing in the back of another cruiser. When everything was over, Lisa was on her way to the hospital with a sore ego, a stiff neck from the airbag, and more charges against her. Putting someone in risk without thinking, damaging property, and hitting a police officer with a car are just a few of the charges. As for me, I stood in the driveway and watched as the beast's body parts were taken away. I really should have been angry, but I just felt relief. It wasn't just the car or the shed being a mess. It was about finally having proof that Lisa was hurting herself the most. She had finally hit a wall, both physically and figuratively, after all her threats, manipulation, and pride. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in months. In the days after the chaos, they had interviews with the police, meetings with lawyers, and awkward phone calls from people they knew who had heard about what happened. Lisa didn't wait to make things worse for herself. After she was freed on bail, which was paid for by her parents, she took almost all of the money from our joint bank account. She took out $9,000 in an instant, leaving me with just $1,000. It didn't surprise me. She did it again because she was desperate and thought she was still in charge. My lawyer and I got to work right away. Thank goodness I knew something like this was going to happen months ago. My parents now own our house because I gave ownership to them before things got out of hand. In legal terms, it was no longer in my name. Lisa would want half of everything, and I wasn't going to give it to her. She didn't know what she was getting into. Lisa brought her shady lawyer with her to our first meeting. He had a bad hairstyle and looked like he thought this case would be easy to win. They didn't wait around to rattle off her requests. Her lawyer slid a stack of papers across the table with a smug grin and said, "She wants the house or half of its value. We will also ask for all the new furniture, the appliances, and a part of the money from the fire insurance." When I looked at my lawyer, he didn't even blink. He casually pulled out a paper and gave it to them instead. He said that the house is not shared property. The father of my client owns it. Lisa can't legally claim it as hers. For a moment, her face turned pale, but she quickly got better and leaned over to say something to her lawyer. His face got tighter with each word he read as he looked through the paper. He said in his head, "This can't be right." It was, though. They didn't have anything. My lawyer went on to say that we have papers for the furniture and appliances that show they were bought with money from my client's father's account. They are also not married property. Lisa's anger was clear to everyone. Looking at me with crossed arms, it seemed like I had betrayed her, which was funny given the situation. She finally lost it. "You're leaving me with nothing." "That's not exactly true," my lawyer said in a calm voice. "Because you want to, we'll let you keep one of the bedroom sets." I thought I heard her grinding her teeth. Soon after, she stormed out of the room, leaving her lawyer to handle the rest. Not much else was given back to her besides her car and some of the money she took out. Her lawyer told her she was losing and that she should settle before things got worse. When the split was over, the judge didn't hold back. He told me I was smart for taking steps to protect my assets, which was his nice way of saying Lisa had been tricked at every turn. When the judge slammed the gavel down, I was already free. She had to deal with the legal mess she'd made by hitting the beast with a police car. For me, it wasn't about getting even. It had to do with staying alive. Lisa tried to trick, scare, and bully me into giving her everything, but I was stronger than she thought. She thought I would give up and let her win. I chose to play the long game instead, and when it was over, I still had my pride. After everything was over and the divorce papers were signed, I could finally take a deep breath. At first, it felt weird. It was almost like entering someone else's life. Lisa and our marriage had been a big part of my life, thoughts, and even happiness for years, but now she was gone. It wasn't lonely in the house, it was just quiet. More like calm. No longer had to constantly walk on eggshells around her, I could finally focus on what I wanted and who I was. The first few months were spent getting my life back on track by fixing up the house, seeing old friends, and discovering things I hadn't done in years. It wasn't to take my mind off things. It was about getting back to the person I was before everything went wrong. It was one of the first things I did after getting back on track. It was always something I liked to do, but I hadn't done it in the last few years of my marriage. I ran into Sergeant Sweetie on one of those trips. He was the cop who had arrested Lisa in the garage. She was wearing pants and a casual top, which was very different from the strict, uniformed person I had seen before. We talked for a while, and I learned that she was also recently single. The end of her marriage was a mess, but not as bad as mine. After a while, I asked her to go on a date. She said yes, which surprised me. That first date was unique. I probably went too far by wearing my best suit, but she seemed to like the extra effort. Early on, she made it clear that she wasn't interested in games or drama. To be honest, I wasn't either. After 9 months, we got married, and I can honestly say it's been the best time of my life. She's not just my wife. In every way, she's my partner. We've built a life together based on trust and respect for each other, 2 things that were missing from my last marriage for a long time. As for Lisa, I knew some people who knew her through mutual friends. 2 times, she got married again, and her second husband seems to be controlling her. I guess that's good for him. There is no longer any anger in my heart. I finally understood that hanging on to anger would only keep me stuck in the past. It took me a while to get there. At the moment, my life is easy and good. I took my wife on a river cruise in Europe for our 25th wedding anniversary. It was a trip she had always wanted to take. I'm so proud of our grown children and how well they are doing. As a wedding gift for our daughter, we gave her my grandmother's old house just last week. It felt right, like everything came full circle. That house had been through a lot of hard times and changes, but now it's the start of a new chapter for her. There are times when I remember those crazy days with Lisa and feel thankful, not sad. I learned a lot about myself and what I can handle from them. Things don't always go as planned in life, but sometimes the unexpected turns take you right where you need to be. I wouldn't change a thing about this right now.